Just an old desk? That's what David thought, until he opened the hidden drawer. At a garage sale, he bought a desk for his son, never suspecting it hid a terrifying secret. But when he found a journal with the chilling words, "If I disappear, it wasn't an accident," everything changed. What he uncovered next shook the entire town. David Carlson wasn't the type to overthink a garage sale. He didn't roam suburban neighborhoods on weekends, hunting for bargains like some people did. But that Saturday morning, as he passed a driveway cluttered with forgotten furniture and dusty knickknacks, something made him slow down. The desk, it wasn't flashy, wasn't modern, none of that sleek, minimalist nonsense. It was solid. Heavy oak, carved legs, deep drawers, the kind of craftsmanship that had long since been replaced by cheap particle board and plastic handles. And the price? A steal. Suspiciously cheap. David ran his hand along the worn surface. The wood was smooth, almost too smooth, like it had been polished recently. Odd considering the rest of the items looked like they hadn't seen a dust rag in years. Behind the table, an elderly woman watched him with an expression that sat somewhere between impatience and... was that nervousness? "You sure you want this one?" Her voice was thin, unsteady. Her fingers trembled as she adjusted her cardigan. David chuckled. "Yeah, unless it's haunted." He expected a laugh, maybe a smirk, something. But the woman didn't react the way normal people do when they hear a joke. No eye roll, no chuckle, just a forced, tight-lipped smile. Just, "Some things should stay in the past." David's smile faltered. Okay, that was weird, but whatever. For $50, he wasn't going to let an old lady's ominous comment stop him from grabbing a deal. That evening, he hauled the desk into his son's room. Ben, 12 years old and already showing signs of inheriting his father's skepticism, gave it a once-over. "It smells weird," Ben muttered, wrinkling his nose. "That's called history," David said, setting a stack of notebooks on the desktop. "It's called real furniture, not the flimsy stuff they sell at the mall." Ben shrugged. He was more interested in the hidden potential of the drawers. He yanked one open, smooth, easy. The next, same thing. Then he went for the smallest one. Stuck. "Dad, it won't open." David stepped in, giving it a firm tug. Nothing. Stuck. "Hold on." David, ever the handyman, pulled out his pocket knife, running the blade along the edges of the drawer. Years of working construction had given him a knack for fixing stubborn things, and within seconds... Click. Something shifted. The drawer popped open, but not in the way it should have. A hidden compartment inside had just unlatched. David's fingers hesitated over the dark space inside. A strange, creeping unease crawled up his spine, like he just unlocked something that wasn't supposed to be found. Inside, there was a stack of old, yellowed papers, folded letters, tied together with brittle string. And something else. Something that made the air in the room drop 10 degrees. A small, black leather book. The edges were cracked, the cover worn, but the moment David touched it, he felt wrong. Like the book itself had absorbed something over the years, something heavy. He flipped it open. The first page was scrawled in shaky handwriting, the ink smudged in places like whoever had written it had been in a hurry. "If I disappear, know that it wasn't an accident." David exhaled sharply. Okay. Now, this was officially not funny. David and Ben locked eyes, the weight of the words sinking in like a lead anchor. The handwriting inside the journal was jagged, uneven, desperate. The kind of writing that comes from a hand shaking with fear, from someone who knows they don't have much time left. David flipped through the brittle pages carefully, half expecting them to turn to dust in his fingers. The name on the first entry stopped him cold. William Foster. The name didn't ring a bell, but everything else about this situation screamed that it should. Ben, sitting cross-legged on the floor, watched him with wide eyes. "Who's William Foster?" David exhaled, shaking his head. "I don't know, but I think we're about to find out." He turned another page. The journal started off normal, too normal. Foster had a job, a family, paid his bills, a man going about his life in the 1950s like everyone else. But then, something changed. The tone of his writing shifted. The words became sharper, erratic, the kind of words that don't belong in an ordinary life. I know what they did to him. I saw it with my own eyes. David's grip tightened on the journal. If I speak, I'm next. His pulse quickened. They said it was an accident, but I know better. I saw them carry his body into the woods. The air in the room seemed to thin. David could feel his heartbeat in his throat. Ben swallowed hard. Dad, is this real? David didn't answer right away. He couldn't, because he didn't know. But the details felt too raw to be fiction. David set the journal down and reached for the letters stacked neatly beside it. The paper was fragile, curling at the edges. Some were addressed to the sheriff's office, others to a local journalist. None of them had been mailed. I have proof. I know where they buried him, but if I say anything, I'm dead. David felt his stomach twist. The urgency in those words. It wasn't the kind of thing you write unless you're already looking over your shoulder, unless you know someone's coming for you. At the very bottom of the pile, buried beneath the letters, was something even worse. An old newspaper clipping, its edges crumbling, the ink fading with time. David barely breathed as he read the headline. Local journalist William Foster declared missing, presumed dead, no leads. His fingers tensed. The man who wrote this journal had never made it out. David barely slept. Every night, long after Ben had gone to bed, he sat hunched over his laptop, a notepad beside him filled with scribbles, arrows, and half-formed theories. William Foster. The name barely left a trace in modern records, like the man had been erased. No Wikipedia page, no family history. Nothing but old, grainy newspaper clippings buried in the archives of the local library. But back in the 1950s, he'd been someone, a journalist. Not just any journalist, one who had made a career out of getting under the wrong people's skin, the kind who dug too deep, who asked questions no one wanted answered, and then one day he just, vanished. No body, no suspects, no investigation. Officially, the case had gone cold. No leads, no follow-ups, nothing. A footnote in the town's history. Just another unsolved mystery people stopped talking about. But David had read the journal, the letters. This wasn't just some conspiracy theory. This was a cover-up. The deeper he went, the more uncomfortable he became. It wasn't just that people had forgotten about William Foster. They had been afraid to remember. Old newspaper columns hinted at a story Foster had been working on before he disappeared, a case involving police corruption, organized crime, and a murder that had been conveniently ruled an accident. A murder someone didn't want exposed. And then there was the entry, the one that made David's stomach churn. They buried him under the old oak tree by Miller's Creek. I saw them. I heard them laugh. David exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. That tree still stood. It had been there for as long as he could remember. Massive, gnarled branches stretching over the quiet stretch of land by the creek. A place where kids dared each other to climb, where families once had picnics before the town let it go wild. A place where no one went anymore, and if the journal was telling the truth. William Foster's body had been lying there for 70 years. David tried. He really did. He told himself it wasn't his problem, that digging into a 70-year-old disappearance wasn't his business, that whatever had happened to William Foster had been buried, literally, for a reason. But some things don't let go. That journal, those letters, the way the words felt too desperate to ignore. So he made a call. Not to the police. Not yet. David had a friend, Mike, who worked in historical preservation, a guy who spent more time with old maps and forgotten landmarks than he did with actual people. If anyone had access to land surveys from the 1950s, it was him. David played it casual. Just curious about old property records, man. Thinking of writing something up about how the town's changed. Mike barely questioned it. Miller's Creek? Yay, I can pull some stuff. Bingo. Now, David just needed an excuse to go there, one that didn't involve shovels and possible felony-level digging. So, the next Saturday morning, he did what any father would do when he didn't want to raise suspicion. He took his son on a hike. Miller's Creek wasn't exactly a hotspot for weekend explorers. It had once been a thriving part of town, back when people still picnicked under the trees and fished in the stream. But now, it was forgotten. The old oak still stood, towering over the land like a watchman from another time. its branches twisted in all directions, gnarled, ancient. David stopped at its base, the journal's words repeating in his head. They buried him under the old oak tree by Miller's Creek. I saw them. I heard them laugh. His fingers tightened around the handle of the small shovel he'd packed, just in case. Ben, completely oblivious, was already kicking at the dirt, uninterested. Can we go now? This place is kind of creepy, he muttered. David hesitated. Was he really about to do this? Then he started digging. The first few inches were nothing but roots and damp earth. But then something changed. The soil was softer than it should have been, like someone had already disturbed it before. David's pulse hammered. He kept going, ignoring the sweat on his neck, ignoring the gnawing feeling in his gut that he didn't actually want to know what was down there. And then a bone. White, too white for an animal. Then another. David froze, the reality of what he had just uncovered crashing down on him like a tidal wave. This wasn't just some ghost story in an old journal. This was real. This was murder. David didn't waste time. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Within hours, Miller's Creek was swarming with investigators. Crime scene tape stretched across the clearing. Officers combed the area. Reporters weren't far behind. The DNA tests would take time, but everyone already knew the truth. They had just uncovered the remains of William Foster. The headlines were everywhere. Journalist's body found after 70 years. Murder covered up. Forgotten scandal resurfaces. Small town confronts its darkest secret. David stood off to the side, watching as the town's history literally got pulled from the dirt. And that desk, that old solid, seemingly innocent desk, it had carried a dead man's secret for 70 years. And now, the world finally knew.